What is up, everybody? Random Random Man here, bringing you my review for The Birth of a Nation. Now, the plot takes place in 1831 in Virginia as it follows Nat Turner, played by Nate Parker, a literate slave who preaches the Bible to other fellow slaves and becomes a religious leader. However, after he sees slavery get worse and worse and sees the ramifications affecting him and others, Turner soon prepares a slave rebellion against those who have oppressed him. Now, there has been a lot of hype surrounding this movie as it came out of the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year with massive buzz. It won the top honors over there. It got the biggest distribution deal for a movie in the festival's history. There has been a lot going around this movie. However, there has been some controversy recently in regard to Nate Parker, some rape allegations against him that happened to him while he was in college. I will not mention that throughout my review, but that is what's hindering a lot of people from even seeing this movie, on top of the controversial subject matter with this true life slave rebellion. But I was still interested in this movie regardless. With the performances, I will say that Nate Parker delivers a great lead performance as Nat Turner. We get to see his progression and what leads him to lead the slave rebellion in the first place, in seeing how emotionally invested he gets in wanting to feel empowered to lead a whole bunch of people against the white plantation owners. You really see what goes on. The supporting players in this movie also do as notable of a fine job as Parker does in this movie. We have Armie Hammer, who portrays an owner of Nat Turner. Jackie Earle Haley is really raw as a slave catcher. We also have other players such as Gabrielle Union. Basically, everyone in this movie does a stellar job. Not only did Nate Parker star in this movie, but he also wrote, produced, and directed it. This being his directorial debut and passion project of sorts. You can really tell that a lot of his vision and just heart and soul is put onto the screen, right down to the title of this movie. And if you don't know, this movie shares the same title as a silent Ku Klux Klan propaganda movie that came out in 1915. And now that this movie is coming out a little over a century later, Parker clearly wants that name to be remembered for something else with a similar racially tense-filled subject matter. I think what he does in the writing, being engrossing throughout, made me feel connected to these characters and what they were going through. I felt like I was back in the 1830s watching slavery be legal in the United States decades and decades and decades ago. It made me feel really disgusted to see that this stuff actually happened. This movie is trying to be an awards contender during this upcoming awards season, and it's easily going to be compared to 12 Years a Slave, which came out a few years ago and was a big awards contender itself. It wound up winning the Best Picture Oscar, and I personally found 12 Years a Slave an excellent movie because of what it was doing with its story. But what Parker does with The Birth of a Nation, he makes it really clear that a lot of it was spiritual and emotional, and try to get you right here in yourself to feel connected to these characters. That also made it feel very brutal at times. This movie's not for the faint of heart. That distinct vision that Parker has kind of works against the movie's favor, because while it is very honest in how it's portraying its subject matter, I thought that some of the in-your-face imagery, not just the graphic stuff we see with how violent this movie can get, and believe me, it does get really violent, but with the spiritual nature and how a lot of the religious themes pop up, it made me go, all right, movie, I get it, you're trying to hammer this part in. I'm not against religious imagery in movies, but sometimes it was really apparent that it was trying to hone in the message more often than not. The other issue I have with this movie is that while it is nicely paced at about 2 hours, the majority first 2/3 of this movie is basically all setup, which I didn't mind, but it led up to the actual rebellion within the last third with a very quick manner, just like that. Nat Turner's rebellion really was used in a swift manner, but I get why Nate Parker intended on the rebellion being very quick in its portrayal in the movie. It's very raw, very visceral, uncompromisingly violent, graphic just like the rest of the movie, and with it being a well shot and acted sequence, I can see people taking issue with it in that they wanted more in having all this setup, having a lot more payoff in the actual rebellion being drawn out. The event itself took place in about 48 hours, so I get Parker's decision to. Aside from those qualms, I think technically speaking, this movie is really distinct and unique. I thought that the cinematography was flat out gorgeous. The way we see all the sprawling plantations and all the cotton being popped everywhere, the shanties where the slaves lived. We see also the surrounding areas in this county in the South. This movie again takes place in Virginia. It looks really nice. The production design with the costumes, the score, I thought was effective even though it played kind of the same chords over and over again, but it really got me. Overall, I think Nate Parker is a promising filmmaker. I'm interested to see what he does next as a director, as I think he did a very nice job in getting his unique vision in telling this story he wanted to tell on the silver screen in a mostly successful fashion. Yeah, I had issues with this movie here and there. I'm not sure if it's going to become the awards contender that it sets out to be, what with the allegations against Parker really stopping a lot of people from taking a chance on this movie. I can personally separate the art from the artist, but that's something to keep in mind still with some people. I also think this movie comes out in a really timely fashion, as racism and prejudice are being talked about more than ever in the news right now, as a lot of parallels with this movie parallel what is happening today. That makes me implore people to see this movie just from that standpoint. But there are some things that I prefer with other similar movies, such as 12 Years a Slave. In fact, I prefer that movie just a notch above The Birth of a Nation. But given its subject matter, if you're a history buff or if you're interested in seeing something like this portrayed on the big screen to get you to learn something and also feel very impacted inside, I definitely recommend it. My final verdict for The Birth of a Nation is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of The Birth of a Nation, subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.